And welcome to this next episode of the Vision Alignment Show. We all understand that we have blindness in our lives, but that blindness doesn't need to stop us. That blindness can only propel us forward. Because if we have our sights set on our vision and have those blinders on at times, and other times take those blinders off, then we're going to be able to experience so much more success, so much more happiness, and so much more joy, because we are doing what we are truly meant to do. And that is connected with our core beliefs, our core values, and our core strengths. Those are in alignment with our vision. And that is important. Someone here today that knows about his vision and knows about how aligned his vision is with his core is none other than Shawn Rhodes. Thank you very much for joining us, Shawn.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I appreciate it. So tell me, Shawn, when is your first recollection of knowing your vision?
It was in 2004 on the front lines of the firefights happening in Fallujah, Iraq.
Wow. If you want to hear more, stay right there. Shawn, there is so much there in one small sentence. Tell us about Fallujah, Iraq.
Absolutely. So in 2004, I was the war correspondent embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps. Actually, was in the Marines, so I was a corporal at the time. And my job, in addition to carrying a rifle and being on these missions with the rest of the Marines, was to capture their stories. And in 2004, we were in the first Battle of Fallujah. There's been a couple of them since then, but that was the first big one. So a city of 300,000 people that were very angry that we were there. And my job was to live alongside these Marines, fight alongside them, clear houses with them, go out on their missions, and then the additional duty of making sure the world knew about the great work that our men and women in uniform were doing. And when my vision became clear to me, it was after weeks of just nonstop combat. We were on very little sleep. Our resupply chain had broken down, so the water and the food wasn't getting to us on time. So imagine a really bad situation. So it was probably not a situation most of us would ever want to relive or be in the first place. And when I got back to our forward operating base, we had a brief respite. We were able to go back and get showers and food. I noticed that all of these books had been delivered to our forward operating base. And being a journalist, I inquired about what the story was. And I was told, well, the libraries in the United States have been asked to donate as many books as they can to the people of Iraq because they don't have anything to read except stuff about Saddam and the Ba'ath Party that he led. Right. And I thought this was weird for a couple of reasons, because most people in Iraq can't read English, yet there were pallets and pallets of these books stacked up. And most of them, second problem, most of them were actually romance novels. So think of like Fabio shirtless on the cover in a very conservative Muslim culture. Like, this was just not going to go over well. But, that was a little above my pay grade. But I began looking through the books thinking maybe there's something here I can read, because I wasn't really interested in romantic fiction. And in the middle of the stack, weirdly placed there, was a book that I'm sure you've come across, Brian. It was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Mm-hmm. And I began reading this. I'd heard about the book, but never really gotten into it. And I began reading. And one of the first habits was, we cannot control what happens to us, but we have full control over how we react to what happens to us. And I needed that message at that time in my life, because I couldn't control where I was anymore. I couldn't control the next mission I was going to be sent on. The Marine Corps basically had full command of my life. And so the only thing that was really left for me, and I didn't know it until I read that in that book, but the only thing I had left was how I reacted to that situation. And that's been my guiding vision since then for the last 2 decades, that we don't have the ability always to anticipate or decide where we're going to be at any particular point in our lives, but we have full control over what happens from there. And hopefully that's something we're going to dive into today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I love it. That's great. So tell me more about your vision.
Absolutely. So my vision today, on the business side and the personal side, they're very closely aligned. My job is to help make the impossible possible. And that really starts with mindset, of course, but then knowing that, you can teach people mindset all day, but they sometimes need those to walk a little further down the track than just understanding in their heads what's going on. I help organizations and sales teams build out better pipelines and manage their sales with the same systems that kept us alive on the battlefields that we were in around the world. So making the impossible possible is the mission that really guides everything I do personally and professionally.
And you do that with your organization that you have?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the company I run is Bulletproof Selling,
Okay.
and we do sales training, keynotes. The book that was just released called Bulletproof Selling, we do that through that book as well. Lots of great ways that we get to do it, but ultimately it comes down to giving sales leaders and sales people the ability to really map out, plan, and better execute on their goals. What they might have thought was impossible, we show them how to make that a possibility.
So you do that for solopreneurs as well?
Yeah, we've worked from home-based businesses, solopreneurs, all the way up to Fortune 100 companies. We find
Okay.
that everybody really has a need for planning and execution at a greater level.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So, from my perspective, I'm a solopreneur myself. So
Hmm.
I'm looking at this from a perspective of how would we work together in order to understand, for you to understand. I think first you need to have an understanding of my business, and then how do
Sure.
we go forward? What's the next step?
Absolutely. So the understanding of the business piece, let's spend some time there because that's where a lot of solopreneurs really missed the boat on this. And I missed it for years as well. And it cost me a lot of revenue along the way. So whether you're working for someone else, maybe you're an employee at a company or you're running your own business, this applies in either case. And it's understanding the benefit that you're actually providing. It's not the thing that you're selling, whether that's a product or a service. It's not the time that you spend in the office if you're working for somebody else. Maybe you're not in a sales position. Maybe you're an administrator or HR or any other role, really. It's not the time that you're spending there. It's really how your impact affects the people that you're there to serve. And if you have an entirely internal role in a company, how does your job impact the happiness, the life, blood, the passion of everybody around you? If you are a customer facing role, whether that's customer support, delivery, sales, whatever that looks like, it's how does what you do make that client's life better? And until we understand that, it becomes almost impossible to convince somebody to buy something that otherwise would be a commodity. You tell me you sell widgets, I can do a Google search and probably come up with someone that'll beat your price. But I know,
Right.
Brian, you understand better than most. The value you bring is your life experience. It's the things that you've been through. It's the lessons that you've learned along the way. And if we really dial in those to how that is going to positively impact what the people you want to work with already care about, it becomes so much easier to build a bridge from your expertise, your passion to what they need. And that's a match made in heaven as far as a client relationship goes.
Yeah, yeah. So in essence, I always hear this: what problem do you solve? That's the simplified way of saying what you said, I think. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. What problem do you solve, and who are the people that care about having that problem solved quicker, more
Right.
efficiently, cheaper?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's got to be gratifying work. A lot going on with all that. So,
Yes,
um,
it is. It is.
how do you stay? How do you stay? Where do you get your clarity first, and then how do you stay steadfast on that clarity?
Yeah, so clarity comes for me from really making sure that I'm spending time working on my business as well as in my business. And for me, I'm an excellent executor. I teach execution. If I wasn't good at execution, I need to find another line of work. But the
Right.
problem with always being, head in the weeds, making stuff happen, is that you can work for years potentially. And I see salespeople do this all the time. They're making calls, they're sending emails, they're doing all the tactical things they need to do, but they're rarely taking the time to step back and consider, is this leading me to my long-term goals? Am I targeting the right organizations, the right size of organization, the people that really have the strategic problem that I want to solve today? And I know in 5 years, maybe I want to be solving a different problem. Am I beginning to build that pipeline now? Because if I don't and I wait 5 years, it's going to be a really tough hill to climb to try to get it done faster. And so for me and my clarity, it comes down to looking at, where's my business today? Where do I want it to be? And what are the things that I can begin executing this quarter, this month, this week to help me get a little closer to do that? And of course, for me, I'm a really visual person. So I like laying out a dashboard. You can do that in Google Sheets or in Excel to be able to say, here are my top line goals, the big, really heavy rocks that I want to move down the road this year in my business or in my life. And maybe you don't run a sales team, or you're not in sales, and you just say, Shawn, I'd like to lose weight, or hey, I'd like to have a better relationship with my spouse, or help keep my kids on track. Great.
Yeah.
Put those big rock goals on a board or an Excel spreadsheet or something, and then look at what are the actions that I can begin taking this month, and what are the actions I can begin taking this week? What can I do today to help me get a little closer to making that happen? Because if we don't define what it is we're trying to achieve, we're throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks, and hoping that we find the time tomorrow to throw more stuff up there and pay attention to what's working and what's not. That didn't keep us alive on the battlefield, which is why we had a different way of executing our missions.
Yeah. So there's probably a lot of speakers on this podcast today. So let's help them and help them with maybe they're entrepreneurs and just in general. But really, I want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to help them. So let's say that that they have a good idea of what they're going to talk about. They have a good idea about the problem that they're going to solve. They're not really sure what clients they should be approaching yet. So once they have that, once they know that, then what would you say is the logical next step in terms of, you talk about in terms of what's the one thing that they should be doing today in order to get farther towards their goal? How would you
going to start today? Yeah, if you're going to start today and you're exactly at that point in the journey that you just described, I would look a step beyond what is the problem you solve. Because a step beyond that is, let's say that you walk that solution through a client that's willing to pay you top dollar to implement it. Okay, that dream client, whatever you price you're charging, 6-7 figures, whatever that is, like they want you and they want you on board for every bit of intellectual capital that you can provide, and they're willing to pay for it. Awesome, right? Well, at the tail end of that, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, 5 years, whatever the length of that engagement is, how is your client better off? What's different about their company that I could walk in there and witness? If I walked in there today and looked at how everybody worked, how they operated, the revenue in the company, how the customer satisfaction scores, all the things that are important to a company if you're working with organizations. If I walk in there today and look at it, and I walk in there at the end of your time with them, what's different? Are people communicating better? Are they making more money for the organization? Are clients happier? Are they retaining more clients? Really map out how things are going to be different when you finish with an organization. If you're an individual, kind of a consumer to consumer in the retail market, like you're a coach, let's say, or you do speak on stages, but you really love working with individuals to coach them to perform better. Well, how is that individual better measurably when you get done with them as opposed to where they are today? And if you don't have any case studies because you're brand new to the market, just imagine what that might look like. Now you've got a changed client state, a whole list of them, hopefully, client benefits, if you will. Now it's going to be much easier for you to ask the question, who are the people that are looking for those things? And to begin reaching out to organizations that, local even, or international, or whatever size you want to target. If you want to work with the big boys and girls, go do that. If you want to work with small home-based businesses, do that as well. But now how am I going to make your life better? Because unless you can define that clearly, you're selling coaching, you're selling a talk, you're selling something that is a commodity, which means there's a Toastmaster down the road that is willing to do it for free, just for the exposure on page. But if you want to get paid for this expertise, you need to be able to link, I'm willing to talk to your organization for an hour. Here's how things are going to be different if you all use what it is that I'm going to be communicating and transmitting, because I've spent the last 40 years of my life or whatever that is learning about this topic. So if we can do that, not only just describe the problem solved, but how people are better off after we solve it for them, we'll have built a bridge that takes entrepreneurs decades to build on their own sometimes. So I advise people do that legwork up front. Once that's done, well, you give me the next challenge. We'll try to work through it and workshop it together.
So let's say and forgive me, you help them with that? You help them to really uncover those things?
Yeah, it's a very simple exercise. I mean, we could walk through it right now in about 45 seconds if you'd like.
Sure.
But
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So take a sheet of paper, break it into 3 columns. In column 1, write down everything that you would answer if somebody said, "Tell me about you, Brian." So you might list where you were raised, where you grew up, your parents, your education, all the things that have happened to you in your life, basically all the things that you would talk about around a dinner table or on a date. Tell me about you. The problem with most entrepreneurs and most salespeople is they spend all their time in that column, talking about them, talking about their product, talking about their service. In the second column, I want you to list all the ways that you deliver that expertise or that product or that service. So for a speaker, that's going to look like keynotes, consulting, podcasts, blogs, books, all the things that we do to transmit expertise. In the third column, write down how is your client better off if they take all that expertise in column 1, transmitted through the ways that you do that in column 2, and they have a changed state. Right? They're different. Something about their lives, their business, their passion, their purpose, something's different at the tail end of that. What does that look like measurably? Not I feel better or I have more engagement, but what does feeling better or better engagement get me in results? Does it mean, higher retention rate of employees? Does it mean if I'm a speaker and I have more passion for what I do, maybe that's more booked gigs, right? More revenue. So walk it all the way down the line. And in that third column, you should be able to fill that up with a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen changed client states. And once you have that, now you have something to approach people with, because they don't really care about the podcast. They don't care about the keynote. They don't care about the vlog. They really don't even care about the live stream. Okay. These are all ways that we transmit value from our expertise, what would exist in column 1. So if you can walk that simple exercise, you can really have meaty statements that then can form the backbone of your marketing language, your outreach scripts. So when you do reach out, you're hopefully not just, guessing that you get it right, actually form a better platform.
So do you then help your clients with that, write up that, whether they're, call scripts or emails and that sort of thing?
The whole thing. Yep.
You help
exactly
with all
what
that.
we do. Yeah. Oh yeah. Pipeline development, from targeting prospects. How do we get them in the pipeline? How do we identify what a qualified buyer might look like? All the way through to closing the deal, generating more revenue and generating more referrals, and keeping everybody in play in the meantime. And that's something that a lot of salespeople tend to miss the boat on. So let's talk to the people that might be watching or listening right now that are midway through their business. So they've made a couple of sales. They've got some gigs under their belt. They're making some revenue, which is great. That's a beautiful place to be. The challenge that a lot of people have at that stage is they're either spending all their time delivering or all their time trying to fill their pipeline. It's usually one or the other, which means they're delivering. When those engagements end, now they're looking at a blank calendar. There's no money coming in, and they freak out. So the way to solve that is to really solve, exactly, right? There's this revenue dip that goes like this. The roller coaster of revenue is what it's called. The way to solve it is stop treating your prospects through a funnel. Now, a funnel being, I've got a bunch of people I'm going to dump in at the top. I'm going to make some phone calls, send some emails, write some cards, and maybe 10% of those or 1% might convert at the bottom. That's a funnel. The problem with that is if you're qualifying your prospects along the way, let's say you put 100 people in there and they all buy what it is that you do, and only 1 or 2 or 10 convert at the bottom, what happens to the people that left? Well, that's called prospect attrition. Those people are going to buy from somebody if you've taken the time to qualify them, but they're not going to buy from you if you're not top of mind. So what we really help with kind of those mid-level entrepreneurs or salespeople or sales organizations do is establish a pipeline. So instead of having just one vertical that you run people through, and if they don't respond, then they just kind of float off to buy from somebody else, it's how do you keep them in play through a pipeline, and literally a pipeline over the course of a year, 5 years, 10 years, so that they do remain top of mind to you and you to them. So no one loses track of one another, so that you're always providing value to them, solving their problems when they do think of, hey, I would really love a speaker for this upcoming kickoff that we're having with the company. Who's that guy been in touch with us, or that gal, for the last couple of months or years? Oh yeah, them, Brian. Got to bring Brian in because he's the one that's been in touch with me providing value. Now the challenge is with a funnel or no system at all, you have to remember to reach out to those folks. So good luck doing that across more than 1 or 2 companies. But with a pipeline, we're currently in my company managing more than 400 qualified prospects. I don't have to guess what I'm going to do with each one of those people next. My system tells me what to do, and we help entrepreneurs and salespeople build that out for themselves.
You must have quite a team that you work with.
It's just myself and an inside salesperson and an administrator. That's it. It's a very small team.
It. And you manage
what allows us. Oh yeah. But what allows us to do it is the systems behind it. So it's not that each one of us has to have a photographic memory and be able to list on a sheet of paper, here are the, 150 people that I'm responsible for from memory. No way. I can't even remember, all the birthdays in my family. No way I'm going to do that with prospects, right? However, if you put all of your people inside of a system like a CRM, and there's a lot of great CRMs out there. Some of them are expensive, some of them are cheap.
So tell our audience what a CRM is.
Yeah, CRM is a customer relationship management tool. It's a software platform. So a lot of them, you don't even have to download anything. You just log in online like you check your Gmail account. But once you're in there, you can load in contacts. You can populate all of the fields in there with data. Like, who is this person? What's their phone number? What's their address? When was the last time they bought something like what I'm selling? Where are they located? What are their challenges? What industry are they in? You can really customize most CRMs to that level. And that way, when they call, I can quickly look somebody up and I can have a record of every conversation we've ever had. Instead of having to remember, I spoke to this person a month and a half ago. What did we talk about? I know they mentioned that their dog went to the vet, but I don't, it's like it really gets confusing. All of that can be taken out of your head, put into a system so that you can be fully present with everyone that you're trying to talk to and provide value to, instead of having to remember.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. I mean, a CRM is definitely a big part of what you do, right? What else? What else do you have? What are some of the other tools that you implement? Are there other software tools or other mindset tools? Are there different things that we have that we need to be cognizant of?
In the personal or professional realm, because we can go pretty deep in either area.
Yeah,
in the
professional realm.
Yeah, so keeping track of your schedule is important. I find that if it doesn't end up on my schedule, it doesn't get done. And so what I do each day is I take the time to map my day professionally. So in the morning before the family's up, I meditate, I listen to some inspirational talks, I journal, and then I look at my calendar for the day, and it starts blank every day. So what that allows me to do is, instead of trying to remember what did I forget to do yesterday, I really go back to my strategy. I think to myself, a lot of stuff happened yesterday. I probably have some emails I need to respond to, but I can't let any of that enter my world at first. I instead focus on the direction that I want my business to go in. I make sure that those things are on my calendar for that day. And then whatever else there's time for is what I can get done. And yes, that means it might be a couple of days before I respond to an email from someone if that's not part of that long-term strategy that I've set for myself. So many entrepreneurs, so many salespeople, they unfortunately let other people set priorities for them. And that they think that whatever is in front of me right now is the fire I need to deal with. No, it is not. People will be okay. The perspective that I have on this is that no one is shooting at me. No one's shooting at you. If I don't get your email answered today, there's not going to be a roadside bomb that's going to go off that's going to take you and your platoon out. So we're not dealing with life and death scenarios anymore, okay? We really got to keep perspective on that, because a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, if I don't get back to them, they're going to think ill of me. My reputation is going to tank, and I have to respond to what's on my email inbox. No. You cannot run a purpose-driven life, Brian, and I know you know this better than most, if you're not placing your priorities first and allowing that to decide what's the value I'm going to provide today, what passion am I going to incite in somebody else today or ignite in another person, how am I going to help an organization. That has to come from where you want your direction to be on your compass rather than what anybody else happens to be throwing you at any given moment.
So how did you come to a point where you understood all this and were able to put this together in the format of a company?
That's a great question. It's been a very windy journey. I'll start. So in 2012, that's when I went out full time on my own, and I had the model where I wanted to be a speaker, consultant, author, life coach, book writer, online content course creator, blog writer, columnist, all the things at once, right? So, I heard that speakers made money doing all of those things. So I decided to try them all at once, and I simultaneously failed at every single one of them. So if there's a mistake that a speaker has made along the way, I've probably made that mistake too, across all of those areas.
That's
and
good to
I
know.
realized that I was running oh man, I've failed many, many times. You talk about failure, like I've got a list that could just like roll forever of all the failures that I've had in the last decade. But that's my job as a business owner, to fail fast. I would rather try something, see if it works. If it doesn't, shut it down, try something else. And that way I very, easily figure out what works and what doesn't. But along the way, as I was running out of money and the mortgage began to come due every month, and I didn't really have the money to pay the mortgage every month. Like a lot of entrepreneurs end up in that situation. I looked at my business and I said, Shawn, you got to try something. And at least, if you just try that one thing and it doesn't work, then you can move on to something else. But the problem with doing everything at once is when something does convert into revenue, it's almost impossible to replicate it because you're trying everything. And so I asked myself, if I was going to consult me, if I was going to say, Shawn, stop, I'm your coach now. Shawn is coaching Shawn, really weird dynamic, like breaking every third wall you can imagine, or fourth wall for that matter. What does that look like? And I said, dude, you just have to try something, systemize it. So, if you need revenue because you need clients, what's your 10-step process for reaching out to clients and talking to them and hopefully getting them to hire you? What does that look like? Map it out and then try it. Do it across 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. And along the way, we realized, well, there were some massive mistakes I was making in that 10-part process, but 6 of the 10 were working. And so all we had to do was adjust and shift a couple of those items on that checklist, and all of a sudden the revenue started to come in because we knew, hey, this thing is working. It's repeatable. It's something that I can take somebody, I identify them, they're this job title, they're having this event. Let's make that happen. And so that became my way of really moving hope from my sales strategy, from my business strategy, and instead replacing it with certainty. Now, I love hope and I love passion, and I take time every day to get right spiritually. Hope is a very important part of my life. But at a certain point, I've got to have a plan to execute that hope off of. And that means my hope can decide my direction, my passion, my vision, but then I have to execute that vision. And that can't happen by hoping I remember what to do that's right today. I've got to have a plan behind that.
That's awesome. So tell me, how do you help people to figure out what niche they are to approach? Because sometimes the flavor of the month or the initiative from a speaker or from an entrepreneur is, I just need to try this different industry and figure out if they work, and then if they don't work, then I'll go to another industry. How do you help people to understand what niche, or if there is a niche, that they should be going for?
Yeah, so there's this old saying in the speaker world that if you want to get rich, you have to niche. And it's only half right. It's half correct. So what a lot of speakers will do is they'll tell you, figure out what your niche is. So maybe you're great at speaking at forestry conferences. Random, but there's a lot of forestry associations out there. A lot. I say maybe like a dozen or less. So if that's your niche, you'll speak at all dozen of those conferences. And if all you do is keynote speaking, it'll take you about, 3 or 4 years to speak at all dozen of those conferences. And then what do you do? Right. So that's a problem if you only have really one industry that you target. What I advise people to do, entrepreneurs and speakers, is don't worry about being in a certain industry. Worry about, worry is kind of the wrong word. Target, I'd say. I don't really like to, allow worry to direct anything in my business anymore. But target those people that have the job title that hire people like you across industry. And from that point, what you've done is instead of fishing in this really shallow pond, you're now in the ocean. And instead of being in this one little puddle that you can only get fish out of, you can identify what is the type of fish that I'd like to bring in. Maybe it's sharks or whale, whatever that looks like for you. So now you know to go looking for that type of fish. And what you'll eventually discover is the fish in the Indian Ocean taste better, do better for you than the fish that come out of the Gulf of Mexico. So now you know to just fish in that pond. Still job title, but maybe you decide that healthcare is really your area of expertise. But it's not just working with cardiologists. It might just be cross healthcare, but that's your thing. And that's a beautiful place to be. So the challenge a lot of speakers have is they're told, really dial into this one area. Well, if you're running a business full time, you may not have 10 years to figure out if that's your one area. So what I instead would advise you to do is examine, who are the people that I really work well with? Who are the people that have a shared background as I do? And that could be, for me, it's military experience. I love working with veterans that are running sales teams. We do great together. Manufacturing, distribution, all the areas that are really blue collar. I do well with those. Maybe for you, it's healthcare. So figure out who are the people you really love working with, you get along with, it, think like you, and then ask who in that industry hires people like me to do what I do. Now you can maybe have a dozen different industries that you're floating across and targeting, one job title that's shared in everybody in that industry. Maybe it's a meeting planner if you're a speaker. Maybe it's executive president or executive director, whatever that looks like. Now you know who to reach out to in those industries. So instead of just fishing in a small pond, widen your gaze a little bit, have more fun with it, And I guarantee you're going to make revenue happen faster than you would if you just targeted forestry and hope that they have room for you on their next event conference calendar.
Yeah. Wow. Great information. One last question. What would you want to leave our audience with today if you had one thing you wanted to leave them with?
Ooh, that's great, man. You should have prepped me for that one.
Sorry.
Oh, you're absolutely good. You're absolutely good. So if we're talking about entrepreneurs, this has been my biggest insight of 2021. Okay, so I'm going to share what's brand new for Shawn. The thing that I always envied about previous generations is they would tell me, Shawn, when I went to work back in the day, whatever decade you want to choose is who I've probably heard this out of many times. They'd say, we love being at work so much. The job was okay, or it was great, but I loved the people that were working alongside me. So much so that we were such a tight team that I just love hanging out with them. So we were all willing to stay late to help each other out. And work didn't really seem like work at that point. It just seemed like a passion. It seemed like fun. And so as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, or even as salespeople, we have the ability to build that for ourselves. That's my big insight for 2021, is that you have the ability to choose who you do business with. You're not just hanging out a shingle and having to, do commerce with anybody that walks through your door. You have the ability to define that. So if you only want to work with a certain group of people that you really get along with, that you love, that you would hang out with and have drinks or, get your kids to get a weekend with, you can do that. You have the ability to consciously create that type of a business for yourself with the actions that you take today, so that you can have all of the benefits that somebody might have if they were working for 20 years in an industry where they absolutely loved it, but they were captive to a boss. They were told when they could take vacation. They were told what their benefits were going to be. We're both part of NSA. One of the greatest things I ever heard out of a session at an NSA conference was entrepreneurship. Well, a lot of people think with that, you're giving up a lot of benefits, healthcare, retirement, and it's not true. You actually gain a lot of benefits as well. Freedom of time, freedom to take vacations when you want, freedom to do business with whoever you choose, or not do business with whoever you choose. Make sure you're taking advantage of your benefits.
Yeah, that's good advice. Take advantage of your benefits. Awesome. Well, thank you, Shawn, for coming on today. I really appreciate you being on. I'm going to close out the show, but before I do, I'm going to send you to the green room, if you don't mind hanging out for just a few minutes, and I'll be there in just a few. Thank you.
That was great.
Right.
Thanks.
Take care. All right. Thanks, Shawn. Wow. Instant value. And that goes for speakers as well as other entrepreneurs. So there's so much that we can learn from what Shawn has to say with his Bulletproof Selling. So phenomenal. We've got a big show coming up for you tomorrow. It'll be me talking more about blind spots and talking about how we all have that ability to see our blindness, to understand our blindness, and to be able to embrace it. So that is why we embrace our own personal blindness to achieve a greater vision for our lives. So that's tomorrow. Then we have other great shows coming up after that. Stick around. Lots of good stuff happening. Lots of good stuff that is coming up from all of this. I appreciate you all being on today. And as always, keep one eye on the